Ah, yes. Oh dear. This doesn't appear. Button on the right hand side. All right, what are you trying to do? Never mind. I had a technical error. Anyway, hello everyone. My name's Jake Kaywell, and I am a creative technologies and public relations double major, which means I am fortunate if I ever get to see the sun. I am a recognized product designer, which we'll get into shortly, and I came into Berry College specifically for the CRT program. Didn't care about the beautiful campus so much, or the friendly people, or the very hospitable Georgian atmosphere. I just really liked what y'all were doing. Specifically, when y'all came to my high school at a promotional fair and just showed me a CRT pamphlet, I was like, oh my god, this is incredible. You can make whatever you want. This is fantastic. I'm going to go right away. So, in the theme of whatever projects I'm designing, it is brutalist themed. Now, brutalism is an art movement that lasted in the 20s and 30s, but in terms of architecture and product design, like what I've been doing, didn't really take off until the 70s and 80s. It's more of a catch-all term for several concrete art movements, pun fully intended, ranging from, say, Art Deco to Constructivism to Bauhaus and to Stillage. It's an umbrella, if you will. But brutalism, first and foremost, is known for sharp angles, and if those angles aren't present, crisp geometry. As you can see in that building, that was the boarding house in Yalta, which I've actually seen, that piece of constructivist art right there, 1919 El Lissitzky's The Red Wedge, the one which actually made me care about art to begin with, and that teapot down there, which I still own to this day, 1980s, made in Italy, made by the Piaggio company, that's known for scooters. So, in terms of stuff that I've done, this is a complex, weeks-long project that I had done completely outside of Hackberry, but is still relevant for what I did. You see, these signs were commissioned for me to do by the government of my hometown, West Palm Beach, Florida. I designed these with of a community revitalization project for a poorer part of town. You can see one of the signs there installed in what was at that point a pretty shabby area of town. But since revitalization, that has become significantly less pronounced. The signs in question use these steel girders in order to accentuate or draw inspiration from the great big skyscrapers of the 1930s, which of course relied on steel girders. These blue inserts were actually reclaimed from a 1950s era staircase that was deemed to be condemned. It was unusable. The city gave me the unique design requirement to salvage these pieces in the sign in some capacity, so I made that work. The problem therefore solved here was use reclaimed materials and also make a pretty effective design for the revitalization project. You can see the other sign when it was first mounted nearby that other house, which I also had a hand in, thanks to my mother, versus what it looked like on the right here. If I can... Ah, yes. On the right here, notice how nicely landscaped this is now that it's finished. The inside logo was furnished by the city. I had nothing to do with that. But the rest of the sign design and even some of the landscaping was provided by myself for this express purpose. So, next bit of evidence, the slab. If y'all were in the hackathon that I made this in back in like February, you'll remember this. You'll notice the concavity of the two separate panels in keeping with brutalist design, but the practical effect of this is that it was able to store knives effectively. I created 3 slots, 8-inch, 6-inch, and 4-inch, in order to hold knives of varying widths, because when you're frantic in the kitchen, you tend to lose these knives, or at least I do. So in order to prevent that, you get these slots. And also to prevent crumbs falling into these holes, I created a little divot that you can barely see there. It will be a lot clearer here. This is just a nice little buffer in order to prevent crumbs from falling into these holes, as evidenced by the knife there. And of course, you have my now trademarked signature that I designed using the skills garnered in Hackberry Lab, along with 4 separate accents. These were laser etched into the bottom of the cutting board. Now, the third example that I have is TikTok. No, not the popular video media sharing app. I'm talking about this, a shelving unit. It's a very unorthodox design, so in order to give you a better understanding of what this looks like, here is a bunch of my watches suspended on the varying plates. The idea is it would look there, look pretty, and also be functional versus just having them scattered out and about in a very unorganized fashion. Like the slab, this was created for organizational purposes, since unfortunately I am a very disorganized person. I wish I wasn't, but that's another subject. I designed this plate after this watch movement, the ZIM 2602. It is the first movement that made me care about watchmaking, and the first one I ever disassembled, and as such, I kind of wanted to pay homage to it. And this photo illustrates more clearly what exactly I did. I took these 3 plates, as seen here, there, 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 and there, and there, and mirrored them as precisely as I possibly could in Fusion 360 before plasma cutting them, thereby creating enough usable surface. In terms of dimensions, this is roughly, 3 feet by 1 foot, roughly. And now we move on to my capstone project, which is a significant deviation from brutalism as a whole, but it is still something very important to me because I'm a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout more specifically. I've worked with various clothing donation centers over time, and I have seen firsthand the deleterious effects of textile waste in our society. So, first off, the average American will donate or otherwise get rid of 81 pounds of clothes in a year. I know I don't, but I probably am not the average American. According to the EPA, that's roughly 16 million tons of textile waste. For a frame of reference, that is the same weight as the entirety of our naval fleet, as the United States Navy. Just that much of clothes every year. Ooh. Only 60% of this clothing is actually accepted by thrift stores for resale or reuse as actual clothes, say Salvation Army, Goodwill, etc. The rest, 40%, is considered waste, biohazardous materials that you cannot safely wear as clothing. Unfortunately, much of this waste is sent out illegally to places such as Central Africa, such as Ghana and Kenya. This was made illegal by the 1995 Basel Agreement, signed by 94 nations in the United Nations, but unfortunately, many developed nations, including us, continue to violate the Basel Agreement. So, as a result, over 15 million items arrive at the ports weekly, and for bales ranging from 50 to 100 kilograms each. That's more than I weigh, which is not an insignificant amount, unfortunately. It's an environmental catastrophe, as you can clearly see from this. This is Old Fadama, an actual mountain located right next to Accra, Ghana's capital city. It grows by 50 tons of cloves per year and has been building for 40 years. Estimated area that it covers is about 10 hectares, which is enough as Mount Everest. So, and what am I going to do to solve this exactly? Well, it's a very complex, multifaceted problem, and I have no illusions that I'll be able to solve all of it, but at least in my own piecemeal fashion, I can do some good to help address this. As Zane said, evolution, not revolution. So, the system that I designed is called Renew Threads. It's consisting of 2 parts, this sorting bin here, as well as a user interface that I code and processing. It's targeted towards Goodwill and their end users, mainly because not only is Goodwill the chief repository of used clothes in this country, but also it is the one that I most readily had contacts to, managers that I could readily speak with and get their input back on this product that could conceivably be featured in their stores at some point in the future in a more refined state. These are sample user tests in the early stage. You see the platform moves down by a series of springs and an axle here to either the waste side or the good side. The sample clothing here used is my jacket, which I theorize to be the upper limit for any individual item of clothing that would be used in terms of weight, at least. It's roughly 4 pounds. So in terms of this lid being able to handle weight, I think it has been achieved. So now we get to the user interface. You will be greeted with this home screen here, and you will be able to click this begin button. The reason why this is in both English and Spanish text is because, of course, a significant portion of the United States speaks Spanish, and it would be a massive disservice to not only me, but also those many millions of customers to just not include Spanish, to have it only be English. Now, based off of the feedback that I received from the Goodwill managers, I was able to come up with 3 questions in order to determine whether or not a piece of clothing was deemed to be acceptable. The first is, does the article of clothing have any unintentional tears longer than a driver's license, or 8.5 centimeters? The reason why Goodwill uses the driver's license as a metric is because it's something most everyone recognizes as a discrete shape. And if not, they can easily pull out their wallets to make sure, oh yeah, this tear isn't all that big, it's under this weight, I'm good. However, the reason why I stress the unintentional bit of this is because Goodwill does recognize that there are pieces of clothing that are intentionally damaged, right? I mean, just look at ripped jeans, for example. So if it's clear from Goodwill's perspective that there's a tear that should not be there in a completely illogical place, like, say, right down the middle of my dress shirt, then no reasonable customer would go ahead and actually purchase that item. Similarly, is the article of clothing stained or soiled by more than 50%? This means irreversibly made dirty, that can't be cleaned simply by a normal washing process. These pair of jeans are actually a reference photo that Goodwill Corporate provided to me in order to determine, yeah, if your clothing looks similar to this in terms of dirtiness, yeah, you shouldn't use it. And similar to the first question, we have, is the article of clothing missing any unintentional parts, sleeves, collar, brim, etc.? Like the first question, the unintentionality is stressed because, like the first question, there are cases where missing pieces of a bit of clothing are perfectly acceptable, like sleeveless t-shirts. Again, it's determined by if a Goodwill customer is the most likely to purchase whatever this is. And finally, if you manage to say no to all 3 of these questions, you'll be greeted with this screen saying that, yes, this article of clothing is good to go. You'll get this QR code below that's eligible for a 25% off coupon off any clothing item in the store. However, if you answer yes to any of the questions, you'll get this screen saying that, unfortunately, we can't reuse this as clothes, but it'll still be responsibly recycled as textile waste. And the reward of $10 off is still given, just to incentivize people to still participate in the program, even though it's nothing that Goodwill directly can reuse. And as my project is fundamentally centered around preservation, I would like to focus on that after college with this, Pyramiden. It's a city located at Svalbard Island, way up in the Arctic Circle. It is Norwegian territory, but the reason why I care about this is because I would like to spend at least a year there as a caretaker. It is a joint venture between the Norwegian and Russian governments. There is a small permanent population of less than 10 people, even though it's officially declared abandoned. And what I would specifically be doing there is working as a film preservation assistant. Because of the unique climate conditions, there exists very little microbial life that can damage film reels. Many, many movies are stored at Pure Meaden, mostly Soviet stock, obviously, but also a fair number of Western films, surprisingly. And many of these, due to the prior ecological conditions discussed, are one of one pieces. So, using my prior CRT knowledge and my burgeoning interest in film as a communications major, I believe that this would be a good fit for me. Oh, and in addition to knowing some basic chemistry, but that's neither here nor there. So, Svalbard Island, located right here, really freaking close to the Arctic Circle. And I would definitely be wearing an ushanka and a fur coat whenever I walk outside. That little A arrow there is exactly where Pure Meaden is. The closest airport is apparently 500 miles away, and I would be required to carry a rifle on my person in order to defend the village against polar bear attacks. I am not joking. I would be required to carry a rifle. So, this is the welcome sign as you enter Pure Meaden. As you can see, it is very much in the brutalist design scheme. Clean geometry, very tall, proud. That is the reason why it's named Pure Meaden, because of the pyramid-shaped mountain out on the distance. That is the town hall, fire department, a couple of general stores, apartments back in the old days, and this, the northernmost statue of Vladimir Lenin, in case you ever get asked that question in a bar. This is where I would be staying. This is the original Pure Meaden Hotel that has been gradually refurbished to its original 1970s Soviet glory. Notice the very tasteful use of carpeting on the wall. And external wood paneling, the height of late 70s luxury. And this is where I would specifically be working, in the Pure Meaden Theater. Again, more glorious wood paneling, and this is the projectionist room. The projector is an Iskra model made in the 1930s, and this is a chemical analyzer for film. I would be working with this machine a whole heck of a lot, and I do hope it's just the lighting that makes it look like a horror set. I don't want to work in these conditions if this is what it's actually going to be like. So, on that very pleasant note, that is the end of my presentation. I will now open up to questioning. Talk about mile a minute.
How in the world did you find it?
Very good question. My mom knew a friend of a friend who apparently served as the American ambassador to Norway. And as such, she was able to connect me with the government agency that's in charge of protecting Pure Meaden.
And you're committed to this for how long?
I'm committed to this for a year, one full calendar year in the Arctic Circle.
Almost anything for a year.
It'll be a very fun time, I'm sure.
Okay, so I see this fitting you exactly right. But I also think it's one of those places that might only be exciting for the first couple of weeks.
Oh, I've been there before. It's a lovely place. If you like the cold, at least, which I do.
Kind of like